if you are 21, if you're 31, if you're 35 and you're just waiting for the right time, the sooner that you can get started, it compounds over time. And we're talking about magnitudes, talking about the difference between $1 million and, not even exaggerating, $30 million.
You could be a millionaire with a very small portfolio at the end of a decade.
What if you could have bought in Los Angeles before it cost what it costs to buy in Los Angeles in 2025? Or to put simply, what if you could have gotten in early in New York, or San Francisco, or Chicago, or Denver, or Seattle, or any of these markets where people say that it is too late to invest in? Well, if you've ever found yourself in this mental rut where you feel deflated that you've missed the boat on investing in the country's best cities, then today's podcast is for you, because I'm here to tell you, I'm going to be breaking down the strategy, the philosophy of finding a market before it explodes. So that 10, 20, 30 years from now, people say, oh my gosh, how the heck did you know to invest there? Plus, I'm doing this podcast with my really good friend, Kai Andrew. And if you stick around until the very end, you're gonna get to hear a massive announcement that we're gonna be making, perhaps the biggest announcement of my career. So all that and so much more on today's episode of Raw Built.
Kai Andrew, welcome to the channel.
Hello, thanks for having me, man.
So I don't know if you know this about me. Do you know what the number one thing that I hate in my my number one hatred that I have? Do you know?
Sour cream on your Chipotle burrito.
What? Who would hate that? No, I hate onions.
Oh, okay, onions.
And onions are very topical today because we were catching up and talking about how a lot of newbie investors tend to complain about breaking into real estate because it is the hardest time in their mind to do so. And you've developed a strategy called the onion strategy that helps put this mindset to bed. So tell us a little bit about what the onion strategy is, and let's break it down on today's episode.
Yeah, for sure. Let's dive right into it. I like that little intro. Now, I'm not sure if I created the strategy. It's definitely something I've implemented before in the past and done with other students and other members, but it's
I like that.
I'm not going to call it to mine. What's that?
I said, I like that. Being above board, I like that.
Yeah. Okay, so essentially the onion strategy is basically just layers. It has nothing to do with food. It doesn't stink at all. It's actually really good. It's how I got started 21 years ago. And it's even how my parents got started 45 years ago. So essentially what's happening right now is we're working with more people is that we're noticing a lot of folks commenting on the housing crisis in most major cities, if not all major cities, and then runaway housing prices, as we all know, since 2021, 2022. And essentially what's happening is that a lot of young folks, primarily younger millennials and Gen Z, is that they are saying that they cannot afford housing inside prime real estate spots. Think about city centers. And that's for as long as I've known, as long as I've lived, including my parents, my grandparents' generation, that has always been true. That the prime real estate inside the city centers is just really difficult. We call that the core of the onion. And so the strategy, what it is that you start drawing layers around, we have Google Maps now, you draw layers around that core. So you have layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. And what happens is as you go out layer by layer, price per square foot goes down significantly. It drops off quite a bit. So inside the city, let's say you're downtown Austin, you're looking at $800, $900 a square foot, right? Absolutely insane. You start going out, say 7 minutes, it drops down to $600 a square foot. You go out another 20 minutes, it drops down to $350 a square foot. You go again, it's now at $150 a square foot. The challenge though with our generation right now, or generations,
the challenge with these kids.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm that guy now. These kids, they don't understand what we had to go through at the time. But is that we want to live inside the city to be right next to our favorite restaurants, our favorite gym, our friends, our job, and everything. And we don't want to make that 30, 45-minute commute. But the difference is between $150 to $200 a square foot versus $1,000 a square foot. That's the difference between you owning a space and being able to build equity and cash flow versus living in debt for the rest of your life. And so the onion strategy is essentially finding the right layer that aligns with your financial situation and where you are in life, and then slowly hopscotching your way in towards the core as you develop financial maturity and the financial ability to actually purchase the more expensive prime real estate. Now, this is the really cool part. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Yeah, I just want to buy what I can afford. Mm-hmm. Is that you make the money in the process of going through that journey of buying more and more properties as you get closer to the core.
Yeah, what's really interesting, I mean, It's you're basically putting a really nice name to what I think a lot of people do on accident. I remember there was this guy that I used to work with at my ad agency. He was an editor, and I think he made pretty good money. I mean, I would say he probably made, I don't know. I mean, probably let's say 180 to 140. Okay, it's a pretty big range, but it'll make sense here in a second. And I remember he told me he had a house in Hermosa Beach, which is kind of in between LA and Orange County. Really sought out a neighborhood. And he was like, yeah, I think it's worth $1.7 million. Now, if you math out how much money you need to buy a $1.7 million house, it's usually a lot more than $140,000, right? 80 to 140, that range that I gave you. And I remember just being like, this was me, and I was making at that time 100K. And I remember just being like, whoa, that's so crazy. Like, he's got this house that's $1.7 million. And I was like, how did you do it, man? Like, you work at an ad agency. And he's like, well, before that, I lived in Redondo Beach, and I bought that house 20 years ago for $400,000. It appreciated to 1.3. So we had a lot of equity. We sold it, took that $1 million, and then put it all into the $1.7 million house. So his mortgage on it was like, I don't know, 400,000, 500,000, somewhere in there. And I just remember being like, whoa, he's so lucky. He bought when it was cheap. But I feel like he didn't do that. He wasn't master planning that. He didn't have some grand scheme. He was just kind of like, yeah, like we had this house and we sold it and took that money and put it into the new house. And I feel like that pretty much, I don't know, sums up the typical American experience. What do you think?
100%. And so sometimes people implement the strategy without actually knowing it. I just like to be a little bit more intentional. When we work with our members, we like to be more intentional with what we're doing. But you're 100% right. That's how I started off when I didn't know much. Is I took the equity from my first place and I leveraged it for my second place. Well, actually, it was cash flow and equity into my second place. Did it for my third place, fourth place. So this is just applying more of a specific name and intent behind it.
Yeah.
But where, like exactly what you're saying is that over time, when you start building up those properties, say 2 or 3 properties in the 5 years, is you can accumulate several hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity and tens of thousands of dollars in income on a monthly basis if you implement the right strategies. Now, what I was going to say earlier that it gets really interesting is not just people think about like city cores, like Austin, San Francisco, New York, whatever, Chicago. But what ends up happening is that you can create cores in other hot spots. So think about like lakes, mountains, rivers, where people like to vacation and visit, right? Now you have these overlapping, not just the cores, but you have these overlapping layers. And if you can strategically buy in those layers that are overlapping, you now have 2 choices in 2 or 3 years is you can move closer to either one of those cores. In some areas, there's like 4 or 5 cores and that are all overlapping. And later on, when we get to our student spotlight, I'll show you one that where somebody did it very, very well. And they just launched 2 months ago, and they're already in the top 1% of the marketplace. And it's a competitive, very crowded marketplace too. But they did it right using the core method.
Nice. So let me ask you this. Whenever you kind of intentionally do the onion strategy, is the idea that, because, you know, there's a thing we talk about on the channel called the sneaky rental strategy. And that is like buying a house for 3.5% down, living in it, and then buying another house for 3% or 5% down, turning the first house into a rental strategy. Is that strategy at play here? Or are you looking at it, like, is it meant to be a strategy in which you're a primary owner, hopscotching to the next thing? Or is the strategy more from an investment standpoint in buying a little bit farther out from a city and just kind of building your investment portfolio that way?
Oh, that's a great question. So it all depends on the intention and where the individual is financially. So some of our folks, they already own 10 homes. They make really good money. They're in their 50s or 60s, but they don't have enough money to buy in, let's say, New York City, right? They have good money, but not that much money. So then we're going outside of the city and we're doing the same type of strategy. And then we slowly start working our way in, but that's going to be a pure investment. For a lot of our folks who are beginning though, it is going to be their primary because they can still leverage really low down payments like what you just said. And they can use it to hopscotch into a bigger home or bigger property. But what we like to do is we don't go off the policy or the strategy of one door, one property. We like to create multiple income streams off that one property. So we have a tax advantage, we have equity creation and appreciation, and then we also have cash flow. And when you add those 3 together, we're talking about a substantial amount of money, usually several times more than what our members or what our clients are making on an annual salary basis. So yes, it plays in both.
Nice. Okay, so we're going to definitely talk about the multiple income stream thing here in a bit. Speaking of, We have a bit of a secret or announcement in this realm. Should we say it now or
It's pretty early. I say we
pretty
hold on
early?
to that.
All right.
Yeah, let's hold on to it for a little bit.
We got a secret for everyone at home, but let's wait until a little bit later. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. I want to clarify the sort of, you said you can kind of create these other cores and choose where you want to go. Let's maybe contextualize this in the world of New York, because I actually think that I can think this is a prime example for me. So New York, always quote unquote expensive, right? I mean, it is. I don't know why I have to quote unquote it, but it's always been pretty expensive. And so what a lot of people did was they started moving out to Brooklyn, and then they started moving out to Williamsburg, which I guess is probably still Brooklyn. But I guess the point is there are these kind of neighborhoods outside of New York that would have been maybe that outer layer. And then now Williamsburg, Brooklyn, again, I know that they're in that same wheelhouse, but they are now super popular, very expensive, and that would be the core for someone else because now those places are arguably unobtainable, right? And so now I guess people's decision are like, okay, which way do we build from there? Is that a pretty good way of thinking about it where like these layers eventually become the core if you strategically pick an investable market?
100%. Yeah, you brought up a really good point. I mean, New York's a great example just because of what's gone through the last 100 years. But yeah, these cores, whether it's, you can take obviously a major city to kind of look at the result of what happens after, 2 or 3 generations. But we look at smaller cities. I'm trying to think of one like right now, like maybe like Little Rock, Arkansas, it's a good size, or maybe even a city in like Boise or in Idaho or Montana. These relatively smaller cities that are nowhere near the size of like an Austin, a Dallas, a Houston, a New York, San Francisco. And eventually they have names for those areas. The counties, the departments, they call them the urban growth boundary. They have this planned out. And usually that urban growth boundary is, think of like a halo that circles around the city core. And that's where they have plans to grow and expand into that area within the next 8 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And they're dumping money into that specific halo. So not only can we create like some assumptions and strategies around it, but we can actually see what the city is planning too. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Those areas, if you go back probably 2 generations, 1 generation, those areas of New York was probably, I shouldn't say super cheap, but way more affordable.
Relatively speaking, totally.
Relatively speaking to today. Yeah.
I'm clarifying Brooklyn. When I was saying that, I meant Park Slope, that neighborhood within it, Williamsburg. They're all within Brooklyn, but again, it's still one of those where it's like, it's such a big area that I think a lot of people would have been like, where am I going to like buy? But now they're their own onions. And now I feel like harder to get into it. And that's just general development, right? Or that's the general development of most cities and suburbs is always the core is going to be expensive. And so people are building these mini civilizations outside of the core at a cheaper rate at a point where they eventually get so popular that now they're their own thriving real estate market.
And this is really what it comes down to when I talk to our members and my clients is we need to get your investment clock started. That's all it is. It's like, listen here, we just need to get you started. Because that investment clock, and you know this, Rob, I mean, most of our folks that are watching this right now, they understand this, is that investment compounds over time. Because look it up on a compound calculator, very good chance. It's not linear. Uh-oh, here comes the cat. Sorry.
That's like, what do you mean it's not linear? I love it. We're not editing this out, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the sooner that you can get started, whether it's real estate, stocks, or whatever, in a principled manner, is that it compounds over time. And we're talking about magnitudes, not just 1x, 2x. We're talking about the difference between $1 million and, not even exaggerating, 10, 20, $30 million if you get started early. So if you are 21, if you're 31, if you're 35, and you're just waiting for the right time, instead is go to a place that you can afford it. Start that investment clock by buying the right piece of property within your budget. It doesn't have to be the prime one, just to get going so you can start building that equity, take the tax savings, building some cash flows. And that's the whole strategy behind it. It's like what you were saying earlier is like, if you can't afford, I'm not super familiar with the Northeast, but you were saying Brooklyn or Park Heights. Was that the other one?
Park Slope and Williamsburg within Brooklyn.
Right. So even those, if you can't afford those, go to the hopscotch to the next layer out. Can you afford that? If not, hopscotch to the next one. until you can find an area that you can buy. But now we're not just buying random properties. We were looking for growth factors. Like, do we know if the city's investing in that area? Is there new public transportation going to that area? Do you see Trader Joe's? Do you see Whole Foods? Do you see some companies building offices out there? Nike, Intel, whatever. I'm saying that because I'm from Oregon. But that's how I found growth. Is I figured out where Intel was, Intel and Nike, which was located near us when I was growing up, where they were building new campuses. And guess what? Those places absolutely blew up when I saw them building these new campuses out there. And then new restaurants popped up, new subdivisions and all that stuff. And then we basically doubled, tripled, I think in one case even quadrupled. This is because of this 2008 time period, but quadrupled in equity. So
do you think that the problem with a lot of these kids, do you think the problem is that a lot of people are too precious to living in that dream city? Like, for example, LA, lots of people are like, oh my God, like I have to be in LA. And, you know, they find themselves getting very angry that LA is expensive. But it's like, I think the harsh truth is just, hey, you probably can't afford to live in LA. And if you really want to build a life in a good portfolio, you might have to consider some of those farther away suburbs that aren't in the heart of the city.
Absolutely. I can say it because I know that I went through it too when I was in my late teens, early 20s, where you see all these folks being successful and you're like, oh, I want that now. I want to be able to ride my bike to work and I want to be able to walk next door to the cafe that I love or the coffee shop that I love. But you can't afford it. It's even more so now just because of social media. And obviously, you know, you and I are part of YouTube and Instagram and everything. We see all these influencers.
Don't we also have like another thing
I know. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit. But yes, you're absolutely right. It's these individual. I should say it shouldn't be based on age or generation, but it's just the financial capacity of folks. Is that we need to start somewhere. I don't care if you're 19 years old, if you're 21, if you're 31, 41. It's that we have to start somewhere. And if you think that you need to set the expectation to live in a prime real estate, but you can't afford it, but you need to, so if it get it, you're going to say like, hey, the housing crisis is going bonkers. I can't afford it. There's a problem with the government needs to fix. I'm sorry, I just don't buy into that. I think that as long as I can remember from myself, my parents, my grandparents, it has always been an issue. And it's a good issue to have because it builds resolve, builds grit, and it shows you how to become financially successful and financially mature too.
For sure. Yeah. I think the real estate portfolio of your dreams requires great sacrifice. And, you know, for me, I got started in house hacking, and that's basically where you own a house and you subsidize your mortgage by renting out rooms or spaces or areas of your house. Literally, you could rent out your couch if you wanted to. The original idea behind Airbnb, right? Yeah. And that requires a sacrifice of not having your own private space, and you have roommates for a long time. But I think that's like the catalyst for my wealth, and I had to sacrifice that. And I think on the onion strategy side of things, maybe you're not going to get that prime location, but eventually it will be. And I think I bought a house in LA in 2017. My wife and I were broke, and I don't really know how we got qualified for the house, but we did. And by the way, we didn't come up with the down payment on our own. We sold our house in Kansas City, had a little bit of money, and we put a 3.5% down payment on. And now that house is worth 1.2, and we're renovating it now, putting about $100K into it. And it'll be about 1.3, 1.4 here in the next few months. And so it's like, I wish I could like tell younger me that, oh man, this house that you're buying is going to be more than double what you paid for it. Just wait 7 years. Yeah. It's just so far away for that younger version of yourself. But if you are patient, it does kind of work out in your favor, slow and steady.
Absolutely. You actually said something to me. I think it was a podcast that you and I did several years ago. It's either that or I think I remember you saying, I'm going to credit to you anyways. Is that you said that when you get into real estate, you start investing in real estate, it's not, you don't buy one, you stop at one for most investors, right? But a lot of times when you look back at your first deal, it's not going to be the biggest shining gem inside your portfolio. You usually get that first one is just to earn your stripes essentially. And then by the time you get to your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, whatever, those are the ones that are going to be really outproducing. You're going to look back at your first one with fond memories, but that was kind of like your what?
Your problem child, or your sacrifice, or your pain.
Right. And if we can make it cash flow, we can make it profitable, fantastic. But that first one is kind of like where you earn your stripes. The one thing, so I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I remember, when I first started, goodness gracious, 12 years ago, I was a brand new white belt, didn't know anything. And you look up at these brown and black belts, and you're just in awe. You're like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do this. I want to go quickly. And so you train harder, you work out more. And then you quickly realize that you can't, it's like a 7 to 10 year journey to get to black belt. And then so once you accept that and you go through the exercise and of going through the process of getting your stripes at white belt, then your blue belt, then your purple, then your brown, then your black. It all accumulates, and at the end of the journey, I don't think the journey ever ends, but at the end of it, you look back at it, you're like, dude, that was totally worthwhile, and I needed to go through those steps. But what I see today, not poo-pooing on anybody's dreams or this generation, because I think it's also in our generation, the millennials, is that we look at black belts, and you're like, I don't have my white belt yet. I haven't even started, but I want to start, and I want to start at black belt level. I want to do cool moves. I want to be able to choke everybody out. I want to go to the MMA. I want to go to UFC. And it's just like, that's not how the world works, whether it's in fighting, grappling, or in real estate. And so a lot of people, what we're trying to get them to do is we're trying to get them, let's get started smart, earn your stripes, get started. And then I'm going to show you one really great example here in a little bit of how this couple, very first deal, who actually coincidentally owns a jiu-jitsu gym. I forgot about that. But anyways, they got started and they knocked it out of the park, like doing 2-3x what other normal folks do. But
I like that. Yeah. So we'll jump into that. I am pretty much, I have a similar analogy, and it's more like everybody wants the home run. And I'm like, dude, base hits, because when bases are loaded, you can go for that grand slam. But the grand slam only happens when the bases are loaded. And it's impossible to do that without any other property. So you have to kind of build this little portfolio. If you're doing it the slow and steady, I mean, some people come into this with a lot of money. Good for them. I didn't. But you slow and steady, and you build kind of this little portfolio that might seem like dogs at the beginning, but over the course of 5 to 10 years, they could very easily go up in equity $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. And if you did that over 10 years, I mean, you could be a millionaire with a very small portfolio at the end of a decade. Maybe
absolutely.
Not, but in that wheelhouse.
Patience is the greatest virtue for investors, and that's one thing that I had learned. I'm not a patient guy. You know me, you've worked with me. I like to get things done right away. I like to jump on things. If there's a new idea, I jump on it right away. Patience is something that's very difficult for me. The one thing that I've learned, if I could pass off to the next generation or anybody else, is that you need to learn patience. Real estate, you will make money. You will make a lot of money. It just takes that 5, 7, 10 years. In my case, in your case too, it sounds like it's over a decade. In my case, it's over 2 decades. And it gets easier and easier to make money over that time frame. Like I said at the beginning, if you start that clock.
Let's talk about the case, the student spotlight.
Okay.
Now their names are Kat and Chow.
Kat and Chow.
Give me kind of the headline here, and let's break down their strategy to contextualize the Onion strategy.
This is the property that they just launched 2 months ago. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you can see that they've already racking up the 5-star reviews, and they're already the top 1% in a relatively very competitive market. And so this is their very first property. They come from, I believe Kat's from Canada, Chow's from here, from the States, but they moved to this area and they didn't know where to start. And they started with our Golden Triangle strategy. If you guys want to learn more about that, you guys can check it out for free on my website or just go to my YouTube channel. But essentially what it is identifying hot spots in a particular area. This one they did something similar with the Onion strategy, where you start identifying the cores, you do the layering, you figure out where the foot traffic, do the demographic study and everything that we talk about. And they identified 4 spots. They asked me not to share spots because the numbers are just insane, and they want to, that's their next project and the next property, so they're currently looking in that area. So I'm like, fair.
All right, you've got to respect it. All good.
Yeah, I respect that.
This is magnificent, by the way. Magnificent.
So when we go into it, you got to see, and I'll show it on my channel. We're doing a whole video. We're doing a tour. We're actually doing a whole case study on them inside our membership here today. So tomorrow at the time of this filming, they'll be in there. We're going to go through a whole case study on this project. But the amazing thing is that we saw the before photos. Nobody would ever think of turning this into a high-end, cash-flowing, equity-building rental. And so what they did is they did the Onion strategy. They found these overlapping layers. They identified the area. In this case is in Deming, Washington. If you guys don't know, it's
so
also
you
known.
can't say that.
What's that?
So you can say Deming, Washington.
Yeah. It's the other one that they're investing into next, where they don't want
Got
to.
it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Deming, Washington, and that is the outer layer of what onion?
Bellingham and Seattle.
Okay. Oh, so Seattle is, hey, it's too expensive here. So they're going, what, 30, 45, 60 minutes away?
Oh yeah, it's even a little bit more than that. I think it's about maybe an hour and a half away, and then it's about maybe 30. I believe it's 30 minutes outside of Bellingham. But here's the other core. The other core is Mount Baker, and Mount Baker is 30 minutes away. Mount Baker is a great place to go hiking, skiing. It's camping, everything that you can think of. And so you've got these three, or actually there's more than three, but there's three big cores with overlapping layers. It falls onto this one area, and that's where they decided to look. Implemented strategies that we talked about inside our program and our membership, and they ultimately found this property. I believe they bought it for $400K. I'll do a whole video and tour of it. I'm going up there in about 2 weeks to meet them and interview them and everything. And within, I believe less than a year, they turned it into this thing that became the top 1%, completely booked out, making 2 to 3x, soon to be 4x, I think close to 4x this summer. Obviously, it's the first season, but they're making a lot of money off this one door, one property, which is generally not the rule of thumb. Typically, what we teach is the first door gets us to break even, second, third, fourth income streams. That's where we make the money. But in this case, their first door is making them 2 to 3x their monthly costs.
Can you clarify that a little bit? When you say 2x or 3x or 4x, I think you just said it, but what do you mean? 3x of what? Expenses?
Yeah. Sorry, good question. I get excited about this stuff. So everything is based off of a payback period or break even. So basically, what are the monthly fixed expenses? So think about hard and soft costs. Hard costs are like insurance, taxes, mortgage, interest payments. Those are hard costs. Soft costs are like Netflix subscriptions, utilities, landscaper, maintenance guy that comes out every quarter, something like that. Those are kind of like softer costs. When you add those all together, ideally we pull a median. Sometimes you can do an average too. We like median of what it is per year. You have you get a set number. So in their case, it's going to be right around 3,500 to 4,000. But right now they're pulling in income of roughly 7,000 to 8,000. So that's a 2x, right? And then in the summertime, we believe that can get up to 11 or 12,000. That's a 3x. You see?
Wow. Yeah. And that 3,500 number is their monthly nut?
Yes,
Meaning
correct. We call it, it's called a monthly nut, but really it's a monthly fixed expenses is what it's traditionally called. We call it a monthly nut.
Inclusive of a mortgage, yeah?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So basically on 7,000, roughly speaking, a $3,500 profit.
Yes, correct.
And then on 10,000 or 11,000, double that. So 6 to 8,000 basically in peak season.
But here's the really great part. So we look at two other numbers, and I know you know this, Rob. It's the return on the cash that you put in the property, and then your payback period. So when we look at that, so let's just say over the year, let's go more conservative, and let's say that they're clearing about 40,000 a year. That's approximately 3,500 a month. Okay, knowing that we know that peak season where they're going to do probably close to 10 to 12,000, but let's just say that they're clearing 40,000. Their cash outlay on this project, I believe, was right around 100 to 110. And we'll talk more about finance and everything inside the video when we do the tour. So what they're doing is they're getting payback on their 100. Let's say it's 100. Let's say 120, just to keep it clean. 120. Okay. Their payback on their original investment is only 3 years.
Yeah, so it's like a 33% cash on cash return.
Exactly. Great. Year over year. So once they pay back their initial investment in 3 years, every year after that, it's just raining money for them, not even including the equity value that they're gaining, that 5 to 6% year over year. This one's probably a little bit more in the first year. Every single year they're making that. So kind of like this is them starting their clock. They start their clock now. And in the next 5 years, they're going to basically get all their initial investment dollars back. And they're going to be making 33% on their money that they put into this project.
Kind of wild, right? And so this is all outside of an hour and a half outside of Seattle.
Absolutely. Where they could afford it. There's no way they could afford to do something like this. Instead, city zoning, permits, cost. Yeah, it would be too prohibitive.
So now is the plan, if we were going to follow, and this may not be their plan, but let's just say we were going to properly follow the onion strategy. Mm-hmm. They roll the cash and equity into a city center that's even kind of in between this place in Seattle, or do they now? You said that Mount Baker, I think, is 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
So now, are they trying to move in closer to Mount Baker since that's another target market. Or you're
Right.
not allowed to say.
No, it's a very wise question. Now, normally what you would do is, you're right, you would start moving towards another core. Okay. However, they love this so much, and they're really good members of our program. They've been with us for like 2 years now, and they're actually doubling down, and they're going into another area. Now, this is really interesting because it's kind of the opposite of the onion strategy, getting closer to a core, is that they're going to another area where they think they can capitalize, more of a rural area. And this is the really cool thing that just actually, I believe this report was just released, but it was showing the growth rate of where most income is created by short-term rentals. And it is hands down, bar none, rural areas. Cities are basically dead. Suburban areas are really low. Vacation areas are kind of like mid. And then, but rural areas with acreage is like head and shoulders above everybody else. And so that's what they're doing, is they're doubling down, not necessarily in a core, because they see the cash flow here. You won't get this type of cash flow. I mean, maybe you can, but at like maybe a 3x in terms of buy-in price in Seattle. But I don't think that you can get that type of return even in Seattle. So they're doing it again in a more rural area, and they're going to be on the outskirts of a core. But they're going to use what they've learned from this project to implement it again.
Nice, dude.
Yeah.
This is crazy. Good for them. That's like legitimately life-changing money.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many others that we can talk about. And Nathan, who I've talked to you a little bit about, he's a nurse in New York City. His property right now, he got 3 cabins and he's expanding it to 8 doors on 8 acres. Life-changing money, $25,000 a month. So, and then his monthly nut is about $9,200 to $9,500, including soft and hard costs.
Crazy.
So, and that's his very first project. 0 real estate experience. 31 years old. He's a smart guy. He can execute. But in terms of like growing up with a silver spoon in his mouth, anything like that, not at all. And it's these folks who are doing this. They're making, like you said, life-changing money. Is changing the trajectory of their entire careers and what they choose to do. Nathan right now is actually not even working. A lot of our folks are actually retiring early to focus on their portfolios now.
Yeah, because if you figure out, that's always the thing, going back to what we talked about, where like you want to advance that black belt. When you become a black belt, looking at it retroactively, you probably think about, oh man, when I was getting started, this seemed impossible. But now that I actually know what I'm doing, no, if I had the coach or the kind of the feedback or the learnings that how can I conduct? Like basically, if I had the blueprint for this very early on, I could have gotten there a little bit faster. And I think with real estate, it's the same way, where everything that I've done now, and I think a lot of people in my audience and a lot of my students are like, oh my gosh, I want what you have. It's so crazy. Like you're smart. And I'm like, no, my failures have amounted to what I have now, but I had to fail a lot. And now looking back at it, like it wasn't brilliant. It was just taking it slow and like working through it a little bit. And I think with some of these people that you're talking about, they probably like know this blueprint now. They're probably like, yeah, okay, that was hard, but I think I could just do it again and again and again times 10.
Yeah, 100%. The one thing I love, and after training jiu-jitsu and a little bit of MMA for over a decade now, the thing that I've learned is people think, and I still think this, right? I look at some black belts, I'm like, they're wizards. They're absolutely, I don't know how they do that. I don't know how they bend. I don't know how they move. I don't know how they understand all of that weight placement, all that stuff, right? But as I've gotten and progressed through my training, I guess you can call it, and talking to more and befriending black belts, one thing that I've realized that they are exceptional at, it's not the fancy special moves that you see on TV or what you see on your clips or shorts or anything like that. They are masters at the fundamentals. The basic stuff that you learn at the white belt, they've just mastered it. And so it's the same thing here with Kat and Chow. What they're doing now is they're learning the fundamentals and they're getting better and better at it, and they're going to re-implement it again. And so I think that's the journey to black belt, is just focusing on the fundamentals, being exceptional, sharpening that blade to the point where you can execute and outperform anybody else when it comes to the fundamentals. And if you look at this property, they just, the fundamentals here it's nothing brand new. They didn't create anything that nobody's seen or heard before. They just executed it really exceptionally well.
Yeah, super well.
Yeah.
Well, that's really inspiring, dude. I think we've held off on the secret.
Yeah.
I say, here's the agenda for the rest of today's podcast.
Okay.
We're going to talk about our secret. And And then we've got some news. We're calling this segment New News.
New news.
Or Real Estate in Real Time. We're still workshopping it.
We're ripping it from New Heights, Kelsey
New
brothers.
Heights. Yeah, and that's okay. I love the Chiefs.
Shout out to them.
It's homage to them. Patrick Mahomes is my hero. I just upset half of America because everybody. No, the secret is that I am no longer the owner of Host Camp.
Yeah, because we're getting married.
That's right. I am now the co-owner of Host Camp, and Kai is also the co-owner of Host Camp. And it's kind of crazy, dude. Can you believe it? We're doing it. We're here announcing it on YouTube.
Oh man, it's I kind of feel like we knew this time was coming when we first started talking and hanging out. We tried to do a couple of investment deals, businesses together, and just busy deals didn't go through because of legal reasons or whatever happened. But you know, the way that we've grown both our channels and our programs or on platforms, the community, it's such a good natural fit, especially with your strengths, my weaknesses and my strengths, and then where you want that extra support. I think it's just a beautiful fit.
Yeah.
And I can tell you the folks that I've talked to in my community are super excited. It's going to be cool to team up on this.
Yeah, man. So our plan for everyone listening to this, Host Camp was once sort of an education program that will teach you how to do Airbnb. And I think that's what Kai's land hacking program is too. But I think our vision is much larger than it's much larger than that. We want to be the staple. We want to be the go-to. We want Host Camp to be the place where you learn everything from short-term rentals to tiny homes to unique stays to development to new construction. I know it sounds like a lot, but I think it's going to be kind of just that I don't want to like bigger pockets, but for our niche.
Yeah.
Am I off base there?
No, you're absolutely right. I like to call it, sometimes I refer to it as alternative real estate investing, right? Most people think of like single family homes, townhomes, condos, long-term rent, hold on to it for 20 years and maybe you make money. You can cash flow enough money to retire in 20 years. The alternative real estate is kind of like what we just went over with Cat and Chow, where they're making $3,500 to $7,000 a month off their first property that they've ever owned, right?
Yeah.
And they created probably $100,000, $200,000 in equity in about a year. That's what I call alternative real estate, because usually you're not creating these cool cabins with experiential stays. And so I'd say from the soup to nuts, basically. So from basically, how do we find these properties? How do we vet them? Do the underwriting, do the market analysis, demographic analysis, all the numbers, and then all the way to the point where you really excel at, Rob, is how do you manage portfolio, and then how do you manage in properties from a distance? And then how do you set up the teams? How do you do it correctly? And when you do that, that's what we're going to be focusing on, all the way from the design, the development, getting feedback, the systems, operations, building up the team. And we've got the support network because you and I, we personally have built it ourselves, but now we've supported thousands upon thousands of students and clients of ours too. So
4,000
it's just
plus. 4,000 plus. We're bringing together this is like cheaper by the dozen, but like times 4,000.
Yeah.
We're bringing together all of our students, and I think we're really looking to build a true company here that builds generational wealth for this country. So I'm excited, partner. If you guys want to learn more about this, if you want to learn about the program side of it and how to learn how to do this stuff, we'll leave a link in the description down below. Book a call with a discovery call with our team, and happy to walk you through all the options and see if we can help you, which most of the time I think we can.
Yeah. And I think most of you will probably end up talking to me because I'll be on the other end of the call.
That's right. So show up. We don't do no shows. I'll come after you if you no show, because Kai's time is very important. Okay, so that's our announcement. We'll probably do more press around this, and we still have to tell everybody. But
Yep.
this is good. This now I have an official deadline. I have to tell everyone before this video drops. Okay, let's move into the final segment here. New news. And so we have a new president. Nothing secret here, nothing political about what I just said. It's just the facts. And lots going on, lots of shakeups, lots of good and bad, I think, with the new president. I'm so political just in this. I always sweat getting like,
He's not my president.
Like, everyone's like, ooh, what's he going to say? I'm ready to jump down his back. So what we want to do is, we saw this article earlier today. It's called Trump's 2025 Tax Plans. Experts weigh in on what could happen. And basically what this article said was this: The Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts of 2017 sunsets in 2025, and a new overhaul is expected. The Trump administration hopes to make key tax policy changes from both individuals and corporations, eliminating income tax. Certain tax changes will have a positive effect, experts say, like putting more money in people's pockets, and there could also be negative implications to some of Trump's tax policies too, including inflation. That's a pretty good overview of what's going on right now. Where would you like to start, sir?
Oh man, I don't even know where to start with that. First of all, I don't think the U.S. government is going to stop collecting income taxes anytime soon. So, as much as you think that Trump's my boy, I don't think that it's going to happen. One thing that I do know about the U.S. government is that they love their tax revenue. They need it. They desperately need it. I mean, we're in a deficit every single year. To cut off income tax and to put it all on tariffs, I just don't think that's feasible. But I will say that I do believe that a lot of the other stuff, especially around real estate investors, so like the bonus depreciation, business taxes, that's helping out small businesses and large businesses who are some of Trump's friends, are definitely going to go into play. But for us more specifically, I'm really interested in the whole bonus depreciation and resetting that back to 100%.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So that's what this first bullet point is, which is the Tax and Jobs Acts of 2017. And that's what enabled 100% bonus depreciation. Now, I've got a ton of content on this channel. Just look up Rob Built Taxes on YouTube. I'll even put a little info card up here. I break down bonus depreciation quite a bit, but basically, for those of you that aren't aware, bonus depreciation is also known as accelerated depreciation, and it basically lets you take a very giant paper loss if you are materially participating in the management of your short-term rental, which is a fancy way of saying if you self-manage your short-term rental 100 hours or more and you manage it more than anyone else, then you can take those paper losses and apply them to your W-2 income. And basically, if you pay a lot of taxes as a high income earner and you buy a short-term rental and you rent it out for 7 days or less, with many other caveats in there, you can take those losses, apply it to your income. And so if you take $100,000 of losses and you apply it to your $100,000 salary, you could defer 100% of your tax bill, with the caveat that those were in the days when bonus depreciation was at 100%. Now, the way that this bill was structured was that every year after, I think, 2021, it goes down 20%, or it might have been 2022. So from 2017 to 2022, you could take 100% bonus depreciation. Then 2023, it went down to 80%. Then 2024, it went down to 60%. And then 2025, it is now at 40%. So the tax benefits of owning a short-term rental are still good and better than any other tax vehicle in the real estate game, in my opinion. Talk to CPA. But still good, but not as good as when things were at 100% bonus depreciation, because that is where you could really start deferring some heavy taxes. And I think the idea here is a lot of people believe that because it's going to sunset really and expire at the end of 2025, Trump is going to come in and bring back 100% bonus depreciation, which, you know, I got to say, wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. We'll see prices go back up, though, in terms of real estate prices if that happens. I think
Why
a
is
lot of
that?
reason. Yeah. What's that?
Why do you think that?
I just think that I think that was a bit of the. I think there was it was a two-pronged approach in 2022 why housing prices spiked so much. I think one was the freaking, was it $16 trillion that was printed? I think that was a big piece of it. And the other one was that 100% depreciation, bonus depreciation for investors.
But do you think that most people, like, dude, I would say arguably have, I mean, I guess I'm not going to give myself credit, but I have really popularized the cost segregation world, the bonus depreciation, as much as I can. As the guy that is known for Airbnbs, I've got a couple videos that really break it down. I talk about it on Instagram. I have a company called STR CostSeg where we will get you low cost reports. And with me screaming on the rooftops, if you are a short-term rental investor, get a cost segregation report. What are you doing? I would say that less than 1% of my audience actually know or care or feel confident enough to do it. Do you really feel like that factors in like a lot? Maybe I'm just like, maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit. Maybe more people do know about bonus depreciation.
Yeah, I mean, like I see it too. So I also have we have a tax company, and I see the inquiries coming through. And a lot of times when people are looking at buying properties, let's say like last year, what was that? 60%? Yes, last year was 2024, 60%. This year's at 40%, right? So when they're buying properties, the few properties that are actually out there right now, their savings is actually relatively low. Like going from 100% to 60%, right? It's quite a big cut in terms of what you're going to be able to save in your taxes. Still a lot, but not as much as when it's 100%. And I think that slows things down just naturally. And people just get fatigued from learning these new things, these new strategies. I do think, though, that if we have this relatively low inventory, which we've noticed that we still have in most major cities, we have this relatively low inventory, and then all of a sudden it goes back up to 100%, and people, investors like you and I, can go out there and offset our taxes by a couple $100,000. I think that we're going to be like, if you and I are both buying in Austin and we found something that the numbers make sense on, I think you and I are going to be bidding on it because we know that we're going to get like $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 off our taxes if we buy that property. And so I'm going to go in a little bit higher than asking. You're going to go a bit higher than asking, and you put that out to a bunch of investors. I think that we're going to start, I don't want to say a bidding war, but I do think that certain houses in strategic areas will start getting bids on them from investors like us trying to capitalize.
I think it makes sense.
Again, I could be wrong.
No. I mean, it's fair because typically the play for bonus depreciation and cost segregation in general is to try to find properties where the improvement, meaning the building, is far more valuable than the land, because you can't write off the land. You can only write off the losses on a building because that's the only thing that can depreciate. And so if you're targeting places like Texas or like me, Arizona, my Scottsdale mansion was mostly improvement value, and we were able to get a $600,000 tax break on that property. Not a $600,000 depreciation write-off, a $600,000 tax break off of like, I don't know, $1.5 million of depreciation. That to me is what people like. If you're strategically looking for that around the country, then 100% bonus depreciation can be rather significant in reducing your taxable income. So yeah, I mean, it's good for investors.
I don't think it's gonna have a big impact on like condos, townhomes, basically single family homes, basically structures that don't pertain to short term rental strategy.
Yeah,
Right.
because the strategy is really. I mean, anyone can take bonus depreciation if they're an investor and a real estate professional, but in the short term rental world side of things, it's beautiful because you don't have to be a real estate professional.
Yes, correct. And I think that's going to be more people than actual true real estate professionals. And so that's why I think that you're going to see the ones that are really STR ready. Those are the ones that I think are going to go up in price.
Are you bearish or bullish on real estate in 2025?
If you look at just 1 year, it's tough. I don't have a crystal ball. I mean, I think it's going to stay relatively flat. I mean, it really depends. I'll double down if Trump passes this and renews this whole bonus depreciation and allowing people to use cost segregation. I think it's going to go up a bit. But I think it's going to stay relatively flat until things stabilize. There's still a lot of uncertainty around the country and around the world. But over the long run, that's how we should look at real estate, right? I talk about it all the time. You do too. It's like, it's not over a 12-month period. You're looking at real estate over like a 5, 10, 20-year period, and it should always be going up. And even if you don't trust us, go back and look at the last, 76 years of historicals on real estate. You'll see that it is a steady climb of, I believe it's 5.5% year over year. Little dips here and there, but it's just 5.5% straight up.
I think it's, last time I looked, it was 3 to 4, but it depends on the market. And yeah, there's places that are 8.
Right.
So yeah, I guess that's my thought. I think you pivot and you adapt no matter what. Yeah. I don't think real estate is ever dead. I think you just pivot how you do it. For me, over the last couple of years, I mean, I've bought stuff for sure, but I have focused way more on taking what I have, polishing it, and increasing revenue. And I have done that successfully with a lot of the dogs in my portfolio. And I am still doing it with the view of the properties that I think could make more money. So that's how I adapt. The way you adapt and the way that I guess our core group of students and program members adapt is development and building from the ground up and value add and finding properties and adding juice to them by adding other income streams on those properties. And if you can develop now, developing and building new, what I love about it is that you build so much equity into the house that it kind of helps you resist some of these, I don't know, kind of valleys in the real estate world. So I think that's another way to adapt. But I'll say this, I can't talk about it too much, but I'm buying a property, or I'm under contract on a property right now that is the biggest property I've ever bought. I'm putting everything into it. We talked about this, like, 7 figures of my stuff is going to go into this property. And I'll say it is over a $4 million property. It is under an $8 million property, just to give someone an idea of how big this is. So I'm pretty bullish because I think that this property has a lot of value add components to it that will take care of my family for many generations if we pull it off. So that's my stance on 2025. I think a steady uptick. Trump says he's going to force interest rates down. Presidents don't really do that. Like they don't just get to push a button and say, "Oh, interest rates are down." But I don't know. That's its own rabbit hole that I don't want to go down today. So
yeah. If you like his policies, you like him or not, that's one thing. But when it comes to small businesses and investors, Trump is definitely in favor of finding tax laws to our benefit. So,
yeah. Well, we'll report back. I kind of like this, dissecting it. Really, I'm going to do my best, and I think you will too. Unbiased, just like let's talk about the news. Let's do a segment that talks about what's actually happening in real estate in real time. Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the channel, bro. Again, for anyone at home, if you want to talk to our team, most probably going to be Kai. We'll leave a link in the description where you can book a discovery call. Other than that, Kai actually has a whole awesome YouTube channel and video where he breaks down the onion strategy, and you can watch that video right here. After, of course, you like and subscribe. But definitely go check that out because Kai has very, very good YouTube videos that make you mad. Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.